Commander Zeftar's mandibles clicked in amusement as he scrolled through the latest intelligence reports from the human colonies. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with similar sounds of derision from representatives of 12 different species, each more advanced than the primitive humans who had somehow stumbled into space travel barely 2 centuries ago. "Listen to this," Zeftar announced, his voice carrying across the crystalline amphitheater. "The humans have established something they call the Mythological Research Division within their military structure. They're actually spending resources to study their ancient fairy tales and legends." Ambassador Thisla of the Serpentine Collective hissed with laughter, her scaled throat pulsing with mirth. What's next? Will they start believing their dead warriors feast in golden halls with their gods? The chamber erupted in various alien expressions of humor. The silicon-based quartzites chimed like broken glass, while the gaseous nebulons created swirling patterns of condensed vapor that somehow conveyed hilarity. Even the normally stoic mechanoids emitted brief electronic bleeps that passed for laughter among their kind. General Vox Kuhn of the Predator castes leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the council floor. His species had conquered 47 star systems through pure military might, and he found human behavior particularly amusing. These creatures speak of heroes who can lift mountains, gods who command thunder, and warriors who never die in battle. Their mythology reads like the fantasies of children who've never seen real war. Indeed, agreed Dr. Sinthara, the leading xenopsychologist of the Cerebral Union. Her enlarged cranium pulsed with soft blue light as she accessed her species' vast database of knowledge. We've studied their myths extensively. Tales of individuals defeating entire armies, mortals challenging gods, heroes performing impossible feats. It's clear evidence of their species' psychological need to create fantasies of empowerment to cope with their natural weakness. The mockery continued for another hour, with each species contributing their own observations about human mythology. The Aquatic Federation representative spoke of human legends involving sea monsters and underwater cities, comparing them unfavorably to the real achievements of his people who had mastered every ocean on their homeworld. The avian hierarchy's delegate mentioned human myths of flying heroes with amusement, noting that his people had achieved natural flight millions of years before humans had even discovered fire. What none of them mentioned, because none of them truly understood, was that every species in the galaxy had their own equivalent myths and legends. The difference was that other species had long since abandoned such primitive thinking in favor of technological advancement and logical reasoning. Humans, however, clung to their stories with an almost religious fervor, teaching them to their children and incorporating them into their cultural identity even as they reached for the stars. Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat in the observation deck of the research vessel Prometheus, watching the stars streak by as they traveled toward the disputed Kepler-4 system. As the newest member of the Mythological Research Division, she still wasn't entirely sure what her role would be in the upcoming mission. The briefing had been classified at the highest levels, involving only a dozen personnel from across various human military and scientific branches. Dr. Marcus Rivera, the division's lead researcher, approached her with a tablet in hand. His weathered face bore the scars of someone who had seen actual combat before transitioning to academic work. "Lieutenant, I know this assignment might seem unusual compared to your previous intelligence work, but I assure you it's more important than you might think." Sarah accepted the tablet and began scrolling through the mission parameters. "With respect, Doctor, I'm having trouble understanding why we're bringing mythology specialists to what appears to be a standard reconnaissance mission in contested space." "That's exactly why you're here," Rivera replied, settling into the chair beside her. "Your intelligence background will help you see patterns that pure academics might miss. Tell me, what do you know about the Battle of Thermopylae?" Ancient Earth history. 300 Spartan warriors held off a vastly superior Persian force at a narrow mountain pass. They all died, but their sacrifice inspired Greece to eventual victory. Good. Now what about the legend of Beowulf? Sarah searched her memory. Scandinavian hero who fought monsters with his bare hands, killed a creature called Grendel, and later died fighting a dragon. And Achilles? Greek hero from the Trojan War, supposedly invincible except for his heel, killed Hector in single combat to avenge his friend Patroclus. Rivera nodded approvingly. 3 very different stories from different cultures and time periods. But they all share common elements. What do you notice? Sarah considered the question carefully. They all involve individuals facing impossible odds, and they all emphasize personal sacrifice for a greater good. Exactly. And here's what our alien friends don't understand about human mythology. These aren't just stories to us. They're instruction manuals. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Captain Morrison's voice filled the observation deck with barely controlled tension. All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We've got a situation. The bridge of the Prometheus hummed with activity as the senior staff assembled. Captain Morrison stood before the main display screen, his face grim. We've received a distress signal from the mining colony on Kepler 442b. It's not pirates or equipment failure. We're dealing with something else entirely. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from the colony's security cameras. What they saw defied immediate explanation. Massive humanoid figures, easily 3 times the height of normal humans, moved through the colony structures with purposeful destruction. Their skin appeared to be some kind of metallic composite, and they wielded weapons that seemed to channel pure energy. The colonists are calling them Titans, Morrison continued. They appeared 3 days ago without warning. No ships detected entering the system. No energy signatures that our sensors could identify. They simply materialized. Dr. Rivera leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen. Captain, can you enhance the audio from these recordings? The sound quality improved, revealing something that made several bridge crew members step backward in shock. The giant beings were speaking, and their language was hauntingly familiar. It wasn't any known alien tongue, but rather an ancient dialect that predated modern human civilization by millennia. My God, whispered Dr. Yamamoto, the team's linguist specialist. That's archaic Greek. They're speaking a form of ancient Greek that hasn't been used for over 2,000 years. Lieutenant Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Doctor, are you saying these things are speaking a dead Earth language?
Not just speaking it, Rivera replied, his voice barely above a whisper.
They're speaking it perfectly, with accents and inflections that suggest native fluency. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. On the screen, one of the Titans turned directly toward the security camera, as if aware it was being watched. Its face was unmistakably humanoid, but possessed features that seemed carved from living stone. When it spoke again, Dr. Yamamoto translated in real time. It's saying, "The time of testing has come. Let them send their heroes, if any remain among the children of Earth. We shall see if the blood of legends still flows in their veins." Captain Morrison turned to his tactical officer. How long until we reach the system? 18 hours at maximum burn, sir. Make it 12. And get me a direct line to Earth Command. They need to know what we're dealing with. As the Prometheus accelerated toward its destination, Sarah found herself returning to the observation deck. The stars seemed different now, less like distant suns, and more like the eyes of ancient gods watching humanity's next test. She thought about the stories Dr. Rivera had mentioned, about heroes facing impossible odds with nothing but their courage and determination. For the first time in her military career, she wondered if humanity's enemies might be something far stranger and more dangerous than hostile aliens or rogue AI. What if they were facing the very myths and legends that had shaped human civilization, somehow made manifest in the cold vacuum of space? Deep in the ship's research laboratory, Dr. Rivera was having similar thoughts as he cross-referenced historical texts with the audio recordings from Kepler 442b. The linguistic patterns were too perfect to be coincidental, too precise to be the result of alien beings simply learning human languages. These entities weren't just speaking ancient Greek, they were speaking it as if they had been present when the language was first developed. His computer chimed with an incoming priority message from Earth Command. The response to their report had been swift and decisive. Additional ships were being dispatched, including the heavy cruiser Thermopylae and the assault carrier Valhalla. But more interesting was the personnel roster for the relief force. Every ship carried members of the Mythological Research Division, along with specialists in ancient languages, comparative mythology, and archaeological xenobiology. Earth Command was taking this threat seriously in ways that surprised even Rivera. It was almost as if they had been preparing for exactly this type of encounter. The message also included classified files that made Rivera's blood run cold. Similar incidents had been reported over the past 6 months across human space, but they had been suppressed to prevent panic. A trading post near Proxima Centauri had been visited by beings matching descriptions of Nordic gods, speaking perfect Old Norse and challenging the station's defenders to single combat. A research facility studying ancient Mesopotamian artifacts had been attacked by creatures that resembled the descriptions of Sumerian demons, complete with cuneiform inscriptions carved into their armor. In each case, the entities had appeared without warning, delivered cryptic messages in dead languages, and then vanished as mysteriously as they had arrived. But Kepler 442b was different. The Titans weren't disappearing. They were waiting. Rivera's hands trembled slightly as he opened the final classified file. It contained a single paragraph that changed everything he thought he knew about human history. Recent archaeological discoveries on Mars have confirmed the existence of structures predating known human civilization by approximately 50,000 years. Linguistic analysis of inscriptions found within these structures suggests a connection to terrestrial mythological traditions across multiple Earth cultures. The possibility that human mythology represents suppressed historical memory rather than purely fictional narrative must now be considered a viable hypothesis. As the Prometheus raced through the void toward an encounter with beings that should have existed only in ancient stories, Rivera began to understand why the galaxy's other species found human mythology so amusing. They saw it as evidence of human primitiveness and wishful thinking. They had no idea they were about to witness the return of humanity's oldest and most terrifying truth. The sleeping quarters aboard the ship had grown quiet as most of the crew tried to rest before reaching their destination. But Sarah Chen found sleep impossible. As she stared at the ceiling of her small cabin, her mind racing through implications she barely dared to consider. She had requested access to the mission's complete database, and what she found there painted a picture that traditional military training had never prepared her for. Cross-referenced reports from across human space showed a pattern of supernatural encounters that defied conventional explanation. Archaeological evidence suggested that human colonies had been unknowingly established on worlds that contained ruins far older than human spaceflight. Most disturbing of all were the medical reports from survivors of these encounters. Personnel who had faced these mythological entities showed physiological changes that couldn't be explained by current scientific understanding. Increased bone density, enhanced muscular development, improved reaction times, and neurological patterns that suggested access to normally dormant regions of the brain. It was as if proximity to these beings was awakening something in humans that had been sleeping for millennia. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Rivera. "Lieutenant, please report to Laboratory 7. There's something you need to see." She found Rivera hunched over a holographic display showing three-dimensional models of the Titans from the security footage. But these weren't just visual reconstructions. The computer had analyzed their movements, their proportions, and their equipment with mathematical precision. "Look at this," Rivera said, pointing to a series of measurements floating beside one of the figures. "These beings aren't just large humans. Their bone structure, muscle attachment points, and skeletal proportions are exactly what you would expect from humans who had developed under higher gravitational conditions over thousands of years." Sarah studied the data carefully. "Are you suggesting these are actually human beings?" "That's impossible. Humans have only been in space for 2 centuries. That's what we've always believed. But what if we were wrong?" Rivera called up another holographic display, this one showing genetic analysis results from tissue samples collected at previous encounter sites. "The DNA fragments we've recovered are definitely human, but they show genetic markers that shouldn't exist in our current population." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You're saying these entities are our ancestors? Or our descendants? Or possibly both?" Rivera's voice carried the weight of someone grappling with concepts that challenged everything he thought he knew about reality. "The mythology doesn't just describe heroes and gods, Lieutenant. It describes where they came from and where they went when their time on Earth ended." Sarah thought about the ancient stories with new understanding. Heroes who ascended to divine status, warriors who were taken to eternal battlefields, gods who withdrew from the mortal world but promised to return when humanity faced its greatest trials. The galaxy's alien species mock our mythology because they see it as primitive fantasy, she said slowly. But what if it's actually advanced history? Rivera nodded grimly. And what if humanity's expansion into space wasn't the beginning of our stellar civilization, but rather our return to it? The ship's alert klaxons began sounding, indicating their imminent arrival at the Kepler 442 system. As Sarah and Rivera made their way to the bridge, they both understood that they were about to confront questions that would reshape humanity's understanding of its own origins and destiny. The stars ahead of them no longer seemed like distant points of light, but rather like ancient beacons calling the children of Earth home to face their inheritance. The Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and immediately every sensor on the bridge began screaming warnings. The mining colony on the fourth planet was surrounded by an energy field that defied analysis, pulsing with patterns that seemed almost organic in their rhythm. Captain Morrison gripped his command chair as the tactical display updated with impossible readings. Sensors are showing massive energy signatures across the planet's surface, but no conventional power sources. It's like the energy is coming from the planet itself. Dr. Rivera studied the readings with growing amazement. The energy patterns weren't random. They followed geometric configurations that matched descriptions from ancient Greek texts about sacred sites and temples. Captain, I need to run these patterns through our mythology database.
Mythology database? Lieutenant Commander Torres, the tactical officer, looked confused.
Sir, shouldn't we be analyzing this as a potential weapon system? Do both, Morrison ordered. But Dr. Rivera's right. Nothing about this situation fits normal parameters. Sarah Chen monitored the communications array, scanning for any transmissions from the colony or the Titans. What she found made her blood run cold. Captain, I'm picking up structured electromagnetic emissions from the planet's surface. The frequency patterns, they match ancient Greek musical scales. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Titans weren't just speaking dead languages. They were broadcasting in harmonics that human civilization had abandoned thousands of years ago. Dr. Yamamoto worked frantically at his linguistic analysis station. I'm detecting multiple language patterns now. Ancient Greek, yes, but also Old Norse, Sanskrit, and what appears to be Proto-Sumerian. It's like they're speaking every foundational language of human civilization simultaneously. Rivera's database search completed with results that made him stagger backward from his console. Captain, the energy patterns surrounding the planet match exactly with descriptions of divine realms from human mythology. The Greeks called it Olympus. The Norse called it Asgard. The Hindus called it Mount Meru. Every culture had their own name for it, but the geometric descriptions are identical. Morrison turned to his science officer. Commander Park, what's your analysis? Commander Park, a soft-spoken woman who specialized in theoretical physics, shook her head slowly. Sir, according to our instruments, the space around that planet shouldn't exist. The energy readings suggest the presence of matter states that violate several fundamental laws of physics. It's as if reality itself is being rewritten in that region of space. Before anyone could respond, the main display flickered and was replaced by an image that struck the entire bridge crew speechless. A massive figure materialized on screen, clearly one of the Titans they had seen in the security footage, but this close-up view revealed details that the grainy colony recordings had missed. The being's face was magnificent and terrible, bearing features that seemed carved from living marble. Its eyes held depths of intelligence and experience that spoke of eons of existence. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the ship's hull, as if the words carried physical weight. Dr. Yamamoto translated in real time, his voice barely steady. It's saying, "Children of the scattered tribes, you have returned to the testing ground as it was foretold. I am Kronos, keeper of the first trial. Your kind has wandered among the stars for centuries, believing yourselves alone and abandoned. But you were never forgotten." The image of Kronos shifted, and behind him appeared a vista that defied comprehension. Ancient structures that seemed to merge classical architecture with advanced technology stretched across a landscape that pulsed with living energy. Other titans moved among the buildings, each one radiating power that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Long ago, when your ancestors first reached for the heavens, they were given a choice. Accept the limitations of mortality and build a civilization based on technology and logic, or embrace their true heritage and ascend to become something greater. Most chose the path of machines and reason, but some chose differently. Captain Morrison found his voice with effort. Ask him what happened to those who chose differently. Dr. Yamamoto spoke hesitantly in ancient Greek, his pronunciation uncertain but apparently adequate. Kronos turned his attention directly to the camera, as if he could see through the transmission to the bridge of the Prometheus. They became us. Your myths and legends are not fantasies, children of Earth. They are the historical records of those who accepted their divine inheritance and transcended the boundaries of flesh and time. We are your gods not because we were born superior, but because we chose to become more than human. Lieutenant Chen stepped forward, her intelligence training overriding her awe. Ask him why they're here now. What do they want from us? The translation seemed to amuse Kronos, his expression shifting to something that might have been a smile. What do we want? We want to complete the work that began when your species first looked up at the stars and dared to dream of touching them. The galaxy mocks your mythology because they have forgotten their own. Every species reaches this crossroads, and most choose the path of technological slavery. They build machines to think for them, weapons to fight for them, ships to carry them between dead worlds where they recreate the same limited existence over and over again. The view behind Kronos shifted again, showing what appeared to be a vast library containing artifacts from across human history. Sarah recognized objects that should have been in museums on Earth. Sculptures from ancient Greece, weapons from medieval Europe, scientific instruments from the Renaissance. But humanity is different. Your kind has never forgotten the stories of transcendence. Even as you built your ships and computers, you carried with you the memories of heroes who could reshape reality through will alone. You named your vessels after gods and legends. You decorated your stations with myths and symbols. You told your children the old stories even as you taught them to navigate the void between stars. Dr. Rivera leaned forward, his scientific mind grappling with revelations that challenged every assumption he had ever made about human history. Ask him about the other encounters, the incidents across human space. Kronos nodded as if he had expected the question. Those were invitations extended to individuals who showed the potential to reclaim their inheritance. Some accepted and joined us. Others chose to remain bound by the limitations of their current form. But all were given the choice, as is their right. The implications of what they were hearing hit the bridge crew like a physical force. The mysterious disappearances from previous encounters weren't abductions or casualties. They were ascensions. Commander Torres spoke up from his tactical station. Sir, we're receiving an incoming transmission from Earth Command. The relief force has arrived at the system's edge. On the long-range display, the shapes of human warships began appearing as they dropped out of hyperspace. The heavy cruiser Thermopylae, the assault carrier Valhalla, and 3 destroyer escorts arranged themselves in standard defensive formation. But as they approached the planet, their sensors began reporting the same impossible readings that the Prometheus had detected. Kronos watched the arriving fleet with what appeared to be approval. Good, they bring warriors with them. The trial cannot be completed by scholars alone. Captain Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. What trial? The same trial your ancestors faced eons ago, the choice between remaining as you are or becoming what you were meant to be. But this time, the choice affects not just individuals but your entire species. The galaxy watches children of Earth. The other races wait to see whether humanity will join them in their technological prison or reclaim its birthright as shapers of reality itself. The transmission from Kronos faded, leaving the bridge of the Prometheus in stunned silence. On the tactical display, the energy field surrounding the planet pulsed with increasing intensity, and new structures began materializing on the surface. Ancient temples, amphitheaters, and training grounds appeared as if they were being pulled from some other dimension into reality. Sarah Chen stared at the display with growing understanding. Captain, I think we're looking at Olympus. The actual Mount Olympus, from Greek mythology. It's not a metaphor or a legend. It's a real place that exists in some kind of dimensional fold. Dr. Rivera nodded slowly. And every human colony ship that's encountered these entities has been issued the same invitation. Join the gods or remain merely human. Commander Park looked up from her analysis of the energy readings. Captain, there's something else. The quantum signatures from the planet match theoretical models for what physicists call consciousness-responsive matter. It's as if the very atoms down there are being controlled by thought alone. Morrison turned to his communications officer. Get me Admiral Harrison on the Thermopylae. We need to coordinate our response to this situation. But as the communication link opened, Admiral Harrison's first words made it clear that the situation had already moved beyond normal military protocols.
Captain Morrison, I've been ordered to inform you that this mission is now operating under Protocol Omega. All personnel are to consider themselves volunteers for an experimental program that may result in permanent alteration or loss of human identity.
The bridge crew exchanged glances of shock and apprehension. Protocol Omega was a theoretical designation that most officers had assumed would never be implemented. It authorized military commanders to approve operations that could fundamentally change the nature of human existence. Sir, Morrison replied carefully, are you saying that Earth Command is considering accepting this offer of transcendence? I'm saying that Earth Command has realized we're facing a decision that will determine the future of our species. The alien races aren't wrong to mock our mythology, Captain, but they're wrong about what that mythology represents. It's not primitive fantasy. It's advanced science that we've forgotten how to understand. On the main display, the planet below continued to transform. The mining colony structures were being incorporated into the growing complex of temples and training facilities, as if ancient and modern were merging into something new. And in the energy patterns surrounding the world, Sarah thought she could see the shapes of other beings moving with purpose and power. Admiral, she said, speaking up despite protocol, what about the colonists? Are they safe? Harrison's voice carried a strange mix of concern and excitement. Lieutenant, according to the bio readings we're detecting, the colonists aren't just safe, they're evolving. The implications of that statement settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Below them, on a world that had become something between a planet and a myth, human beings were being transformed into something that the galaxy's advanced alien races couldn't even comprehend. Dr. Rivera accessed his personal files and pulled up a quote from ancient Greek philosopher Plato. The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. As he watched the impossible energies swirling around Kepler, a 442b, he began to understand that humanity's greatest trial wasn't about technology or military might. It was about having the courage to become what they had always been destined to be. Captain Morrison stood and addressed his crew. Ladies and gentlemen, we came here expecting to investigate a hostile contact situation. Instead, we've discovered that we're participants in a test that our species has been preparing for since the dawn of civilization. I won't order anyone to participate in what's about to happen, but I will ask this. How many of you grew up dreaming of being heroes from the old stories? Every hand on the bridge slowly rose into the air. Then, let's go find out if those dreams were actually memories. As the Prometheus began its descent toward the impossible world below, the last thing Sarah Chen saw on her sensors was a massive structure materializing at the planet's north pole. Her computer identified it from mythological databases with 97% certainty. Valhalla, the Hall of the Chosen Slain, where heroes went to prepare for the final battle that would determine the fate of all existence. The age of mythology, it seemed, was just beginning. The landing party from the Prometheus touched down in what had once been the mining colony's central plaza. Now it resembled something from humanity's oldest dreams and deepest fears. Marble columns rose from the ground as if they had been growing there for millennia, while holographic displays showed star charts that mapped not just physical space, but what appeared to be dimensional layers of reality itself. Lieutenant Sarah Chen checked her equipment readings as her boots made contact with the surface. According to her instruments, the ground beneath her feet wasn't quite solid matter anymore. It responded to her presence, becoming firmer where she needed support, softer where comfort would be beneficial. The very planet seemed to be aware of her as an individual being. Dr. Rivera emerged from the shuttle behind her, his scientific instruments practically humming with activity. Sarah, look at these readings. The atmospheric composition is changing in real time to optimize oxygen levels for each person in our group. It's as if the air itself is being customized for our physiological needs. Captain Morrison gathered the landing party around him. The group consisted of 12 volunteers from across the ship's departments, each one having been specifically selected for psychological profiles that indicated openness to transformative experiences. Remember, people, we're here to make first contact with beings that may represent humanity's own evolutionary future. Stay alert, but don't let fear override curiosity. As they moved deeper into the transformed colony, they began encountering the structures that had materialized during their approach. The architecture defied easy categorization, blending classical Greek elements with technologies that seemed to operate on principles beyond current human understanding. Columns that appeared to be carved marble generated energy fields that could be felt rather than seen. Sculptures that looked purely decorative tracked the movements of the humans with eyes that seemed genuinely alive.
"Captain!" called out Dr. Yamamoto from his position near a massive archway. "You need to see this inscription." The archway bore text in multiple languages, all of them ancient, all of them somehow perfectly legible to every member of the landing party regardless of their linguistic background.
The message was simple but profound. Welcome home, children of the stars. Your true education begins now. As they passed through the archway, the humans found themselves in what could only be described as a training ground. Other figures moved through the space with fluid grace, and it took Sarah several moments to realize she was looking at the missing colonists. But they had been transformed. The miners and researchers who had disappeared 3 days earlier were still recognizably human, but enhanced in ways that challenged the boundaries of the species. Their movements possessed a fluid efficiency that spoke of perfect neuromuscular coordination. Their eyes held depths of awareness that suggested access to normally dormant regions of consciousness. Most remarkably, they seemed to be manipulating their environment through focused intention alone. One of the transformed colonists approached the landing party. Sarah recognized him as Marcus Webb, the colony's former chief engineer. But the man who stood before them now radiated a presence that made the air around him seem to vibrate with potential energy.
"Sarah," Webb said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in her bones, "I was hoping you would be among those who came. Your psychological profile indicated strong potential for what we're offering here."
"Marcus, what happened to you? What happened to everyone?" Webb smiled, and Sarah caught a glimpse of something behind his eyes that was both wonderful and terrifying. "We remembered who we used to be. Before humans convinced themselves that consciousness was limited to biological brains, before we decided that reality was fixed and immutable, before we forgot that the universe responds to will and intention when properly applied." Dr. Rivera stepped forward with his scanner active. "Marcus, I'm reading energy patterns around you that shouldn't be possible with human biology. Your cellular structure appears to be in a state of controlled quantum superposition. That's because it is, Doctor. Consciousness isn't produced by the brain, it's channeled through it. The brain is an antenna, not a generator. What we've learned here is how to upgrade the receiving equipment." Captain Morrison studied the transformed colonists with military precision. "Show us what you mean." Webb nodded and walked to a section of the training ground where large stone blocks were arranged in seemingly random patterns. He placed his hands on one of the blocks, and it began to rise from the ground without any visible means of support. More importantly, as Sarah watched, she could feel something changing in her own perception. The block wasn't defying gravity so much as existing in a state where gravity was just one of several forces that could be consciously selected or dismissed. "The universe operates on consciousness as much as physics," Webb explained as he lowered the block back to the ground. "Your ancient philosophers understood this. Plato wrote about the world of forms that exists beneath apparent reality. The Hindus spoke of Maya, the illusion of fixed physical existence. Your quantum physicists are rediscovering the same truths with different language." Dr. Rivera's scanner was showing impossible readings. "Marcus, according to my instruments, You temporarily shifted that block into a state where it existed primarily as organized information rather than solid matter. Exactly. Matter is organized energy. Energy is organized consciousness. Change the consciousness. Change the reality. Your ancestors called it magic because they didn't have the vocabulary to describe advanced consciousness techniques. We call it science because we're finally sophisticated enough to understand what they were actually doing. A new voice interrupted the conversation, speaking in accented English that carried the weight of vast experience. The landing party turned to see Kronos approaching, his massive form somehow moving with perfect grace across the training ground. The demonstration is impressive, Kronos said, but understanding requires more than observation. You came here seeking answers about what has happened to your people. The real question is whether you have the courage to discover what you might become yourselves. Sarah felt her heart pounding as she looked up at the being who claimed to be a figure from ancient mythology. Are you really one of the titans from Greek legend? I am what those stories attempted to describe, Kronos replied. Human language, then and now, struggles to convey the reality of consciousness that has transcended the boundaries of individual identity while retaining the essential nature of self. Your myths called us gods, because that was the closest concept available to describe beings who had learned to reshape reality through pure intention. Captain Morrison approached Kronos directly, his military bearing intact despite the impossibility of the situation. What do you want from humanity? What we have always wanted. To complete the work that began when your species first looked up at the stars and realized they were not bound to a single world. Every race in the galaxy faces the same choice, Captain. Accept the limitations of physical existence and build civilizations based on manipulating matter and energy from the outside, or transcend those limitations and learn to work with reality from within. And what happens to those species that choose transcendence? Kronos gestured toward the horizon, where massive structures were still materializing from what appeared to be pure thought given form. They become what you would call gods. They move beyond the need for ships and weapons and technology because they learn to be the conscious architects of their own existence. They join the community of transcended beings who work to guide younger species toward the same realization. Dr. Rivera looked around at the impossible structures surrounding them. And the species that choose technology? They build impressive civilizations that eventually stagnate and decline. They map the galaxy, catalog every phenomenon, build machines to think for them and robots to feel for them. They become very sophisticated, but they never grow beyond the limitations they accepted at the beginning of their development. Sarah thought about the alien species they had encountered through human expansion into space. Advanced civilizations, certainly, with technologies that impressed and sometimes intimidated human explorers. But now that she considered it, all of them seemed somehow static, as if they had reached a peak of development and then stopped growing. The beings who mock human mythology, she said slowly. They're afraid of what they chose not to become. Very good, Lieutenant. Your species disturbs them because you carry forward the memory of transcendence even while building technological civilizations. Your myths and legends are proof that some part of humanity has never forgotten its true potential. Webb approached the group again, his enhanced presence somehow reassuring rather than threatening. Sarah, the choice isn't permanent. Those who undergo the initial transformation can return to baseline human consciousness if they decide this path isn't for them. But they'll retain the memory of what they experienced and the knowledge that the option remains open. Captain Morrison looked around at his landing party. Each member was staring at the transformed colonists with a mixture of fascination and fear. What exactly does the transformation involve? Kronos smiled, the expression both paternal and predatory. Remembering. Your DNA carries genetic markers that were activated in your ancestors who achieved transcendence. The process involves awakening those dormant capabilities through a combination of consciousness techniques and controlled exposure to what you might call metamorphic energy fields. Is it safe? It is the safest thing a human being can do, because it involves becoming more fully human than your current form allows. The dangerous choice is refusing to grow when growth is offered. Dr. Rivera studied his readings from the transformed colonists. Captain, The biological changes appear to be entirely beneficial: increased bone density, enhanced neural efficiency, improved immune function, and cellular regeneration rates that suggest significantly extended lifespans. And the mental changes? Webb answered that question. Enhanced pattern recognition, access to normally unconscious cognitive processes, and the ability to directly interface with quantum-level reality. But the core personality remains intact. We're still ourselves, just more so. Sarah found herself stepping forward before she had consciously decided to speak. How long do we have to decide? The energy fields that make transformation possible will remain stable for approximately 72 hours, Kronos replied. After that, they will dissipate, and this opportunity will not arise again for your species for several centuries. Captain Morrison activated his comm unit to contact the ships above. Admiral Harrison, we need to relay our findings to Earth Command immediately. The situation down here is beyond anything our protocols were designed to handle. Harrison's voice crackled through the comm and was static, that seemed to carry emotional weight. Captain, I've been monitoring your bio-readings from orbit. According to our sensors, several members of your landing party are already showing physiological changes consistent with the transformation process. Sarah looked down at her hands and realized that Admiral Harrison was right. Her skin seemed to be generating a faint luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Around her, other members of the landing party were showing similar changes. The transformation begins the moment you accept it as a possibility, Webb explained. Your consciousness is already starting to expand beyond its current boundaries. The question now is whether you'll embrace the change or fight against it. Kronos nodded approvingly. Your species has always been unique in its ability to accept paradox and change. While other races seek certainty and control, humans have always been comfortable with mystery and growth. It is why you alone among the galaxy's species have retained the memory of transcendence. Dr. Rivera looked at his scanner readings in amazement. My instruments are showing quantum coherence patterns in our neural activity that shouldn't be possible with baseline human neurology. We're literally thinking at a deeper level of reality than normal consciousness allows. The implications of what was happening settled over the landing party like a warm wave. They weren't just witnessing humanity's next evolutionary step, they were actively participating in it. Captain Morrison made a decision that would reshape the future of human civilization. All personnel, activate your recorders. Whatever we decide here today, Earth Command needs a complete record of what this choice entails. As the sun began to set over the transformed landscape of Kepler 442b, the humans found themselves standing at the threshold of becoming something that the galaxy's other species would find completely incomprehensible. Gods walking among the stars, carrying forward the dreams that had driven humanity to reach for the heavens in the first place. The transformation chamber existed in a space that defied architectural logic, its crystalline walls seeming to extend infinitely upward while simultaneously feeling intimately enclosed. Sarah Chen stood at its center, her consciousness expanded to perceive layers of reality that baseline human awareness couldn't access. Around her, the final members of the landing party completed their own metamorphoses, each one emerging as something more than they had been while remaining essentially themselves. Captain Morrison stepped out of his transformation alcove, his military bearing now enhanced by a presence that made the air around him shimmer with barely contained power. Status report. Lieutenant. Era's voice when she spoke carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through dimensions of space that had no names. Sir, we have complete integration of enhanced consciousness capabilities. All personnel retain full memory and personality coherence, while gaining access to what the Titans call reality interface protocols. Dr. Rivera approached them, his scientific instruments now reading as extensions of his enhanced nervous system rather than external tools. The changes are remarkable, Captain. We can perceive quantum probability streams, manipulate matter at the molecular level through focused intention, and access what appears to be a collective human memory bank that spans across space and time. Outside the transformation chamber, the landscape of Kepler 442b had evolved into something that resembled the mythological realms described in humanity's oldest stories, but realized through technologies that transcended the boundary between science and magic. structures of living crystal-housed libraries containing the accumulated wisdom of every human civilization that had ever achieved transcendence, while training grounds provided spaces where newly enhanced humans could learn to master their expanded capabilities. Kronos approached the emerging humans with what appeared to be paternal pride. You adapt more quickly than most species. The combination of human flexibility and your cultural preparation through mythology creates an ideal foundation for consciousness expansion. Marcus Webb, now serving as a liaison between the original colonists and the arriving humans, gestured toward a massive amphitheater that overlooked the planet's transformed surface. Captain, there's something you need to understand about what comes next. The transformation we've undergone is just the beginning. The real work starts when we return to human space. What do you mean? Morrison asked, though his enhanced awareness was already beginning to perceive implications that his baseline consciousness would have missed. The galaxy's reaction to humanity's transcendence, Webb explained. The other species have spent millions of years building civilizations based on the assumption that consciousness is a byproduct of complex matter, not the fundamental force that shapes reality. Our existence as transcended beings challenges everything they believe about the nature of existence. Sarah found her enhanced perception automatically analyzing the strategic implications. They'll see us as a threat. More than that, Kronos interjected. They'll see you as proof that their own choices were mistakes. For millions of years, they've convinced themselves that their technological approach to existence was the superior path. The return of humanity's gods will force them to confront the possibility that they chose limitation when they could have chosen transcendence. Dr. Representative, Rivera accessed the collective memory network that his transformation had connected him to, pulling up historical records from previous species that had faced similar choices. According to these records, most species react to transcended beings with a combination of fear, denial, and aggression. They try to prove that technological supremacy is superior to consciousness expansion. Captain Morrison studied the strategic display that his enhanced awareness could perceive hovering in the air around them. It showed the positions of major alien civilizations across the galaxy, along with probability analyses for their likely reactions to humanity's transformation. Admiral Harrison is going to want a complete briefing on this situation, Morrison said, activating his enhanced communication capabilities to reach the fleet above. But when his consciousness touched the quantum communication network, he discovered something that made him pause in amazement. The network wasn't limited to local space. It extended across the entire galaxy, connecting every transcended being regardless of their physical location. And what he found there revealed the true scope of what humanity was joining. "My God," he whispered. "We're not the first species to achieve transcendence. There's an entire civilization of transcended beings operating throughout the galaxy. The community of ascended consciousness," Kronos confirmed. "Every species that chooses transcendence eventually joins this network. We've been working for millions of years to guide younger species toward the same realization, though most reject the opportunity when it's offered." Sarah's enhanced perception allowed her to directly interface with the network, downloading vast quantities of information about galactic history from the perspective of transcended beings. What she learned changed her understanding of everything humanity had encountered since reaching the stars. "The alien species we've met," she said slowly, "they're not just advanced civilizations. They're what happens to species that refuse transcendence. They become increasingly rigid and technological, losing the ability to grow beyond the limitations they accepted at the moment of choice." "Dr. Kenter," Rivera nodded, his scientific training helping him process the implications. "And they actively suppress any evidence of transcended beings because it threatens their entire worldview. Which means," Captain Morrison concluded, "that humanity's transformation is going to trigger a galaxy-wide crisis." Marcus Webb led them to an observation platform that provided a clear view of space above the planet. In the enhanced spectrum visible to their transformed consciousness, they could see the energy signatures of thousands of ships belonging to various alien civilizations, all converging on the Kepler 442 system. "They're already coming," Webb said quietly. "Every major species in the galaxy has detected the energy signature of a successful transcendence event. They'll arrive within days, and they'll demand that we reverse the process and submit to their authority." Kronos joined them on the platform, his ancient presence radiating calm certainty despite the approaching crisis. This is always how it happens. The technological species cannot tolerate the existence of transcended beings because it proves that their entire civilization is built on a false premise. What do they typically do? Morrison asked, though his enhanced awareness was already calculating the most probable responses. They attempt to use their superior numbers and firepower to force the transcended beings back into baseline consciousness. They threaten the homeworld, they destroy colonies, they do whatever they believe is necessary to maintain their illusion of technological supremacy. Sarah felt her enhanced consciousness accessing battle records from previous transcendence events. According to the historical data, these conflicts usually result in the technological species' complete defeat, followed by their gradual acceptance of transcendence as an option for their own development. But not always, Rivera added, his scientific mind analyzing the statistical patterns. Sometimes the technological species choose to withdraw from contact with transcended beings entirely, creating isolated pockets of technological civilization that slowly stagnate and decline. Morrison activated his communication link to Admiral Harrison aboard the Thermopylae. Admiral, we need to prepare for a significant alien response to what's happened here. Every major species in the galaxy is about to converge on this system. Harrison's voice carried new harmonics that indicated he, too, had been affected by proximity to the transformation energies. Captain, I've been monitoring long-range sensors. We're detecting approaching fleets from the Galactic Council, the Predator Caste, the Cerebral Union, and at least 6 other major civilizations. Their estimated time of arrival is 36 hours. Sir, what are our orders from Earth Command?
That's where things get complicated, Captain.
Earth Command has been in direct contact with the community of Ascended Consciousness for the past 6 hours. It turns out this opportunity for transcendence has been planned for decades as part of humanity's gradual introduction to galactic civilization. The implications of Admiral Harrison's words settled over the transformed humans like a revelation. Their species' entire expansion into space hadn't been a random exploration driven by curiosity and ambition. It had been a carefully orchestrated process designed to prepare humanity for its ultimate evolutionary choice. Kronos confirmed their growing understanding. Your species was selected for transcendence millions of years ago, when the first human ancestors demonstrated the psychological flexibility required for consciousness expansion. Every aspect of your development since then has been guided to prepare you for this moment. The myths and legends, Sarah said with growing amazement. They weren't just stories, they were educational materials designed to keep the memory of transcendence alive in human culture. Exactly. While other species abandoned their transcendence mythology in favor of technological development, humans continued to tell stories of gods and heroes and impossible achievements. Your entertainment industry, your literature, your entire cultural framework has been preparing your species for the reality of expanded consciousness. Dr. Rivera accessed the historical records with his enhanced capabilities, discovering patterns that baseline human awareness would never have detected. The timing of our space expansion, the specific worlds we've colonized, even the alien species we've encountered first. It was all designed to bring us to this point. Morrison studied the tactical situation with his transformed strategic awareness. And now we're about to face a test that will determine whether humanity joins the community of ascended consciousness or becomes another technological species, isolated from transcended reality. As if summoned by his words, the space above Kepler 442b began filling with ships. Alien vessels of every conceivable design dropped out of hyperspace in formations that spoke of long military cooperation between species that normally competed for resources and territory. The Galactic Council's crystalline dreadnoughts, the Predator Caste's biomechanical destroyers, the Cerebral Union's energy-based vessels, and dozens of other ship types representing civilizations from across the galaxy. Admiral Harrison's voice carried grim determination as he reported the situation. Captain, we're detecting over 3,000 alien vessels taking positions around this system. They're broadcasting demands for immediate reversal of what they're calling the consciousness contamination event. Sarah felt her enhanced awareness automatically analyzing the tactical implications. Admiral, with respect, Those ships represent every major technological civilization in the galaxy. Even with our transcendence capabilities, we're facing overwhelming numerical superiority. But, as she spoke, her consciousness connected to something vast and powerful moving through the galaxy toward their location. The community of ascended consciousness was responding to the crisis, and their approach would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. "Actually, Lieutenant," Kronos said with a smile that contained eons of experience, "we're about to give the galaxy a demonstration of why consciousness will always triumph over technology in the end. The final battle for humanity's transcendence was about to begin, and it would determine whether the galaxy continued down its path of technological limitation or opened itself to the infinite possibilities of expanded consciousness." In the space above Kepler, 442b, 3,000 alien warships prepared to face an enemy they didn't understand, wielding powers they had forgotten were possible, fighting for a prize they couldn't comprehend the value of. The age of mythology was no longer beginning. It had arrived.